Welcome everybody to session 4 of the Paraprofessional Academy. I'm so glad to have you either logging in on our live Zoom or watching this video after we've recorded it. I appreciate your time and I appreciate you being a part of the Para Academy. I'm going to share my screen. And today we are going to be learning about instructional strategies. That is session 4's topic. Should I make sure that I have everything ready to go? So we are going to focus on instructional strategies today. And instructional strategies are so important for you guys to have as paraprofessionals. You guys are in multiple classrooms throughout the day. You guys are supporting students in multiple content areas. So my hope is that we can give you a few instructional strategies that you can implement in your classrooms, whether that be an inclusion classroom or a co-taught classroom where you have a gen ed teacher and yourself, or a gen ed teacher along with a special education teacher and you as a supportive instructor, or whether you are supporting in a smaller group classroom, what we used to call a resource classroom that just has students with disabilities in for those areas. So hopefully these instructional strategies will help you no matter where you are. The first thing that I want to say is, as a paraprofessional, is to know your worth. In order for learning to occur, students with special needs have to have those learning needs met appropriately inside the classroom. And in order for learning to occur, your supportive instructional role is paramount, not just for the kids that you support, but also for the teachers that you work with too. It takes everybody. It takes a village, right? And you as paraprofessionals are the ones who help to make that learning possible. We could not do it without you. This next slide shows a few of my parapros that I've had in the past. They are both teachers now, but these are some of my favorite paraprofessionals who became my best friends. We've seen each other through marriages, through children. So I know that these relationships are important. The relationships that you have with your coworkers and with your students are so important. And those relationships really support student learning, which is what we're going to focus on when we talk about our instructional strategies. So how do you guys make learning possible? You are the extra hands and eyes in the classroom. You guys are checking on and supporting specific student needs. You're supporting teachers. You're supporting classroom instruction. You're supporting with activities and materials. You guys carry out whatever accommodations students require in those classrooms. You put into practice planned instruction, including related accommodations and modifications that students have in their IEPs. You guys are implementing behavior plans. You are recording student data, helping with progress monitoring. That student data can be academic, it's behavioral data, and social skill performance as well. So in addition, I want to look at the instructional settings that you guys work in. You guys are supporting instruction in many different environments. Some paraprofessionals work with a group of students that may move from classroom to classroom throughout the day or during that week. Some instruction and paraeducator responsibilities take place outside of those classrooms as well. Sometimes you guys are working with a group of students or with a teacher in a small group classroom, or what we call a resource classroom. So the settings that you guys work in can be varied. You guys have instructional and supervisory duties and responsibilities as well. You guys are supporting on the playground, in the lunchroom, some on the bus, or loading and unloading from bus areas. And a great deal of instruction can happen for behavior, social skills, and those independent skills in these locations. But we know that each instructional setting is going to have its own set of rules and requirements. The way that you are going to support instruction in a co-taught math classroom would be different for how you would support social instruction on a playground or in the hallway, going from class to class, those transition periods. So each of these, your support will look different, also based on the teachers that you're working with or the supervisors in those areas. The instructional strategies that I'm going to share with you on this slide are instructional strategies that can be applied in all of your learning environments. Because you guys are so varied in where you are and where you support throughout the day, I wanted to make sure that one thing that we hit on were strategies that you can use no matter where you are with your students. I want you to consider comfort. So providing a comfortable place to work without distractions is a great way to meet sensory needs that some of our students have. One way to consider comfort is to lessen the visual stimuli. Our students are still growing as learners. Their frontal lobes are still developing, and sometimes it can be difficult to focus whenever there is distracting stimuli around. So as much as possible, lessening that visual stimuli is a great strategy to support learning in all environments. Providing choice is another way, if at all possible. And these are small choices. Do you want to sit or stand to complete this activity? Would you like to use a blue pen or a black pen? Would you like to use a pencil? These are small things that can really help to meet sensory needs of our students, and to help really provide them a bit of autonomy as they work in their school settings. And the final thing that I want to talk about whenever we talk about considering comfort is music. If music is allowed in the setting that you're in, music can be a benefit to students. Studies have shown that. If there is a task or an activity that requires extreme focus, this could be solving math problems, reading independently, or completing a writing task. Playing music that has no words and that is 60 beats per minute or less as background sounds can be beneficial for students. There was a study done, and in this study, they took this song, and this is a link here that you can click on when you access the PowerPoint. But there is a song that was created by a neuroscientist called named Marconi Union. The song is named Weightless. And in that study, they played the song for 3 minutes, and there was a 65% increase in focus and task completion for this group of students. I actually play this song on the way to school each morning when my daughter is taking state tests. That way she is, it helps to reduce her anxiety and really kind of help her focus on the beginning of her day. Another instructional strategy that you can implement in all of your environments is to be on top of those accommodations. Know your student accommodations and have those accommodations ready for use. And I have a few examples up here. There are lots of accommodations that our students have, but a few of the examples that I wanted to highlight today were those visual supports. A great thing to have are examples or exemplars of whatever work or task you want them to complete. So if a student is going to complete a writing task, having an example to show them that they can use as they work through those steps is hugely beneficial. Another accommodation that can help in all learning environments are graphic organizers. These are tools that students can use to help organize their work as they complete any activities that are required. Another accommodation would be to repeat directions or reteach those concepts as they are needed. Sometimes it's difficult for our students to remember directions as they are working through a task. So being able to repeat those or reteach concepts as you guys see those needs is important. Something that I always did as a co-teacher during instruction is I would take notes. And I would also ask my paraprofessional to take notes so that that instruction can be retaught as needed. Sometimes whenever we are giving instruction, the strategy that we are using to teach may need to be tweaked or changed depending on whether or not our students are learning in the way that we are presenting that information. So if you have those notes ready, you can see, okay, I taught this certain math problem using this strategy, and my student was not able to pick up on that. Do I need to relook at that strategy or how I taught that? So that is just another tip or another instructional strategy that you can apply in all environments. And finally, planning for extra time. Many of our students need extra time. And if you know that there is a task that is presented that will require your student to have extra time, talk to that teacher, meet with them and say, hey, this student, that student, that student are going to need extra time. Where can we build that time in to be able to support that need of the students? Another instructional strategy that we can use for all learning environments is proximity. So proximity is how close or far you are away from a student or an object. So for this example, we are going to be thinking about our students. What is the distance between you and your student whenever you're in that classroom? Whenever I'm doing professional learning, and I have a group that is a bit more talkative, while I'm instructing, I will actually walk around and go closer to that group that's a bit more talkative. And what I notice is that group tends to kind of quiet down a little bit, and they will focus on whatever instruction I'm giving a bit more. And that works with adults. It also works with students. So choose your location or position based on the activity or the amount of support that's required. So let's look at different activities. We've got independent activities where students need to complete them independently. And we've also got small group activities. We're going to break down the idea of using proximity as an instructional strategy by independent versus small group activities. So for independent activities, be proactive. Do check-ins with your students to ensure that that student understands those expectations. Be prepared. Be prepared to repeat directions. Be prepared to reteach a concept, or be prepared to teach whatever next step is required for that student in order so that they can function independently in that task completion for that activity. This next one is going to be a toughie sometimes. So for independent activities, be ready to walk away. We are going to promote student independence by giving them what we call struggle time. So the idea is that you give instruction, you give them an example or exemplars, and then you allow them to have that time to work on that activity independently. We call that struggle time. Now, when they need help, they could potentially raise their hand or give you a cue that they need support in that area. But if you have students that really struggle to independently work, maybe even setting a timer would be a good idea to promote that time of focus and time of independent work for them. Be prepared when this happens to be able to sit back and focus on something else. That way that student knows you are communicating that the expectation is that you give instruction, they receive instruction, and their to-do list or their task list or their steps, and you have confidence in them that they will then be able to complete those steps that you've given them. This helps to support their confidence. If they know that Miss Farney trusts that they can complete this work, then that will help to build confidence within them. And as always, be positive. Use those positive behavior supports and compliments whenever they are completing these activities. We always want to really pay attention to and recognize those efforts that they are giving and any of those positive behaviors that they are showing. That helps with really not just their confidence, but also building a positive rapport and building a positive relationship with your students too. So we've talked about those independent activities and how we can use proximity or distance to support that with our independent students. Now let's look at small group activities. With small group activities, be proactive and have those accommodations ready. Be prepared. The first thing that you're going to do are those check-ins. You can check in with those students to really gauge where they are in their understanding or background knowledge of what is being taught and what those expectations are. Also be prepared. Have those examples or exemplars, which is a visual support that shows them what task they have and what it looks like completed. Have those ready so that they can independently be supported as a group. We know we're going to have to repeat those directions or potentially reteach concepts as we go. So map those steps out that need to be completed so that those students know what they're expected to do in your small groups. And use what we call I do, we do, you do in instruction during your small group activities. So with I do, as an instructor, you are going to verbally and physically work your way through whatever task you want them to complete. So for example, in writing, if you're working on writing an introductory paragraph, first you are going to sit with the students as they watch you, and you're going to instruct them on how to write that introductory paragraph. So you would write that out. Then the we do part of it is as a group, you guys would, as a group, work through that same activity. So as a group, you would come up with your topic sentence and some supporting sentences. And then ultimately, you're moving from the I do, where the teacher teaches and does the activity and the students watch and learn, to the we do, where the students as a group and you together complete that task, to you do, where the student is then independently able to work and complete whatever tasks are given. And this is a tough one. Walk away or sit back. Sometimes in classrooms, we may not be able to walk away from some students, but being able to sit back in your chair, have your notes ready where you're taking notes or you're taking, progress monitoring data, or you're doing something else, will let them know that struggle time that they are having, or that independent work time, or that small group work time is there, and you have that expectation that because they have that knowledge, because they have those accommodations, because they have exemplars and those steps lined out, that you are expecting them to do that work. Also cue or prompt by asking questions or giving them those next steps that they need in order to complete those small group activities. And of course, be positive. We want to use those positive behaviors, interventions, and supports, and we want to complement the effort that they're giving. We may not always be able to complement a task that is completed correctly, but we can always look at the effort that they're giving and compliment that. Another instructional strategy that we can use in any setting is giving feedback. So what is feedback? I'm going to take you through that. So feedback is information on a person's actual performance versus their ideal performance. Okay, so the ideal performance would be the best of what we want them to accomplish. We're giving feedback on the person's actual or the student's actual performance. Feedback is provided by an agent. So that could be a teacher. Feedback could be given by a peer. We could use books or a rubric for feedback. A parent, we can give self-feedback, or an experience can be used to give feedback. Feedback takes on new forms of instruction and has a dual implication because it's included in the instruction. Academic and social, emotional, behavioral domains. So why is feedback important? Feedback increases engagement during instruction and improves student outcomes. Feedback also assists the teacher in monitoring student understanding. And feedback prompts students to continue successful attempts during practice or remedy errors before they become entrenched or before those errors become habits. There are 4 components of effective feedback. Whatever feedback we give, we want to make sure that it's effective. So I want to take you through these 4 components of effective feedback. Feedback has to be goal-directed. It's got to be constructive. It needs to be immediate. And of course, it's got to be respectful and positive. And we're going to go through those next. The first component of effective feedback that we're going to focus on is goal-directed feedback. So effective feedback is goal-directed. We set clear goals with students, and we provide feedback that helps students improve performance to get closer to their goal. Goal orientation can increase students' motivation and engagement. And I'm going to give you an example of each component of effective feedback. So our example here, focusing on goal-directed feedback, is I really like that you've started your paragraph off with a clear topic sentence. That is exactly right. Now let's see if you can think of 3 related detailed sentences that you could write to turn that topic sentence into a paragraph. So we are giving them a goal. They have, we're letting them know our expectation is to ultimately turn that topic sentence and supporting sentences into a paragraph. We're letting them know that topic sentence, exactly where we need to be. Now let's think of 3 detail sentences that we can add to that topic sentence as we are forming a full paragraph. The next component of effective feedback is constructive. Effective feedback is always constructive. It supports students as they progress toward mastery of a new skill. And effective feedback provides students with actual steps to take in response to that feedback. So here's an example. You're on the right track with question number 3, but there's a small error. Look back at your sample problems and see if you can find where you made a calculation error with a negative number. So we're giving that constructive feedback as they're progressing toward that new skill. The new skill is to solve this equation using whatever strategy we've taught them. And we are recognizing that they're on the right track. They have completed some steps correctly, but we're also saying we've seen an error. We're not telling them, you know, look, you did this wrong right here and pointing to exactly what they did. We're saying you made a calculation error with a negative number. Go back and see if you can recognize that and correct that error. The next component of effective feedback that we're going to focus on is immediate feedback. Effective feedback has to be immediate. It's not going to pay off for us to give a student feedback on something that they completed last week. For our kiddos, there are a million things that have happened between last week and this week, or even from day to day. So if we can give feedback immediately, that is going to be best practice for us to support our students. So effective feedback is immediate. It should be given as quickly as possible after the student has performed a task or behavior. Immediate effective feedback prevents students from practicing incorrect actions. So we can keep them from developing incorrect habits by giving that immediate feedback. And immediate feedback is especially important when students are in the early stages of learning a new skill. Here's the example that we're going to work from today. My expectation is for students to be responsible and ready for class every day. To be responsible, you need to bring your notebook and your pen. Let me help you develop a new strategy for ensuring that you are ready for class tomorrow. So you recognize that that student is not prepared, is not equipped to complete any work in class today, maybe because they have not brought their materials. So you're letting them know immediately, hey, I see that my expectation is for you to be responsible and ready. Part of being responsible is bringing your notebook and pen. If you have those materials, then you're responsible, but you're also ready for learning. Let's develop a strategy that will help you to help to ensure that tomorrow when you show up for class, you've got your materials and you're ready to learn. And then you can work with that student on what that strategy might be. It might be a set of reminders that you give that student. But because you are using that immediate feedback when you see an issue or whenever you are working on a task with that student can then use that immediate feedback to alter their behavior or their performance, or to correct any actions that they need to do. And the final component of effective feedback is giving feedback that is feedback that's respectful and positive. Effective feedback is respectful and positive always. It focuses on successes and progress and not deficits. So we're not pointing out inability. We're pointing out successes and the work that they're doing or the progress that they've made. Respectful and positive effective feedback keeps focus on actions rather than making personal judgments. And it also motivates students to achieve their best on tasks. So here's the example that I have for you today. Abby, you did a great job with this the last time we worked on it. So I know you can do it again. Let's take it step by step and find a better way to answer these comprehension questions. Sometimes our students may not feel like doing that work that they were assigned. We know that they have the ability. Sometimes that can be frustrating for us, but making sure that we're giving them immediate and effective feedback in a respectful and positive way can do a lot to help with motivation. Now we're going to talk about supporting academics. We're going to go into reading, math, and writing, but I'm also going to look at general academics that you guys support students in. So first, we're going to focus on reading. So some instructional strategies that can help with reading for all students, but especially for middle and high school students, are leveled texts. So these are books that are written on a level that's more accessible for our students. So an example would be Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet is a leveled text that you can get from, likely you can get from your professional library at your school. And it simplifies the language that was used to write in the original text. So this gives our students access to that same learning material, but just on a text that they can be more independent learners with. And And something else that I do for my daughter, her reading level is she reads on grade level, but she struggles with focus. So something that I do for her is if she's reading Othello in her high school literature class, I will get the Othello graphic novel. And by using graphic novels, that is something that I used whenever I was in high school, a high school teacher and an elementary school teacher. My students responded very well to graphic novels, and there are lots of graphic novels that mirror the typical novel that can be used as an instructional strategy to support in those settings. Something else for reading is to preview either sounds if you're working on phonics, or if you're working at a word level, previewing those words or those vocabulary terms with your students prior to getting into a larger reading or phonics activity. And I've got an image here of a vocabulary preview. Sometimes whenever our students have not been exposed to some materials, it can seem daunting. So making sure that we take our time beforehand to really prepare them for that, whatever learning material in literature that we have is important. So that may be previewing vocabulary, previewing words that are coming up, especially if you're in a science class that may have vocabulary that's unfamiliar. Previewing that information ahead of time can help to really build background knowledge for those kiddos. And that's where I'm going next, building background knowledge. I want to talk about schema for a minute. So schema is a collection of network or previously gained knowledge that affect how new information is processed. So schema regulates how people learn and how they recall information. So for us to learn, we have to connect newly learned information to knowledge that's already present in our long-term memory. So what we do is we connect new information to schema, that existing information, so that we can more easily learn the content and recall that newly learned material. I'm going to give you an example of this. So if we know that we're going to start a unit about the Civil War, and I've got students that may not know very much about the Civil War, I could go to Google and pull up a map that shows how the U.S. was divided during the time of the Civil War. Or I could find a video on YouTube that supports that would help to build that background knowledge. That's a way of using, of previewing, but also using that schema to learn that new information. Another strategy that we can use is to set goals and to praise efforts. All right, so we can set goals for whatever we're doing in our reading classes. We can take time giving feedback and praising the efforts of what our students are doing in those classes. The next thing I want to look at is fluency with rhyming. So this is just a tip that I learned as a teacher. When we're working on supporting students to become more fluent readers, using rhyming to do that, especially with nursery rhymes, or if you've got a middle or a high school students, pulling out school appropriate songs that student can read aloud will help if it has a rhyming pattern. And supporting with pictures. Some students may have a difficult time using what we call their mind's eye. So imagining what is happening or what that text is showing. So making sure that we're using visual supports or supporting with pictures and images is a great strategy to support students during any reading activity. Now we're going to tackle math. So using a number chart or a number line is a great instructional strategy in math. This can be, there are even number lines for fractions. A number line is great, or a number chart is great, because this can help a student with those executive functioning or those organizational skills. But it also helps to map out that numeracy, learning of those numeracy concepts as they are working through what we expect them to learn. Using manipulatives. Whenever I was an elementary school teacher, I always had a little caddy from the dollar store, and I would have a big 100 block. I would have some ones blocks and some base 10 blocks also. I would have those on standby with a little laminated 120 chart in there. Supporting students learning in math by allowing them to use manipulatives can help those students go from an abstract concept with sometimes math can be, to a more concrete understanding. Making sure that we're working step by step with our students is another great strategy for us to use. Whenever my co-teacher and I taught three-digit subtraction, what we would do is we would come up with a step-by-step chart for them to use. And we would do that so that they could then know where they were in their process of learning. So the first thing that we would do, they would look at their starting number, their three-digit number, and we would build that number with base 10 blocks. We could either do it with base 10 blocks, or some of our students would take a Post-it note and they would draw out those base 10 blocks. So we would build it, and then we would look at the number that we were dividing, and we would take those base 10 blocks and we would bust them up so that we could then subtract or take away what we were expecting them to take away based on that subtraction problem. Which leads me to set it to music. In our class, we developed a chant when we taught that concept. And many times setting it to music can help to calm anxiety, but it can also help students to focus. Now, remember, our music has no words and it's 60 beats per minute or less. But setting music as a background can support students with focus. Also, what we did was we created a chant for our students. And our chant was, build it, bust it, take it away. I apologize for my musicality. But because we would have that chant ready for our students, that then opened up those schema pathways in their mind to attach that learning to something that they already knew. They knew that song. So then they were able to take that song, build it, bust it, take it away, and attach meaning to each of those steps. And that helped those students become independent learners. On YouTube, there are tons of songs for doubles. There are tons of songs for multiplication. Many of these songs are set to nursery rhymes like The Farmer in the Dell, but there are some songs that are set to a Taylor Swift music, right? And so the songs, they're catchy, but they also go, they are a great example of how to use music to support that learning. And I would highly suggest looking up multiplication songs on YouTube. Another great strategy in math, as in all of our academic classes, is instruction using I do, we do, you do. So as the instructor, you are leading instruction in the I do, and those students are looking at that instruction as they learn and process that new material that they are being instructed on. And then we do, as a group, you are working through that same task together. And then ultimately you do. As they build those skills, they are able then to independently complete those skills. And finally, in math, lots and lots of exemplars. And I've got an image of what that looks like up here. So I would give them lots of visual supports and examples of what those problems look like during each step and completed, so that they have that exemplar to use if they're completing a math problem independently, and they don't know what to do on their next step. They can look at that exemplar and say, oh yeah, that's correct. I need to isolate the variable and then add or subtract from both sides. I see thumbs up and I love it. I love feedback. Thank y'all. Now let's tackle writing. Writing's not the most popular subject for many of our kiddos. I love teaching writing. And I'm going to give you some instructional strategies that really helped me to be an effective teacher in writing. One of them is sentence starters. And we're going to kind of work through this with the idea of writing on a topic. So this would be a sentence starter for an opinion writing. So in my opinion, blank is the best ice cream flavor. Blank is the best ice cream flavor because. So our topic is, what is the best ice cream flavor? I'm giving them that sentence starter, and that will support the student to get started and to really look at what's being asked of them and to then start completing that writing activity. Another idea is to minimize choices or topics. So we want to give students choices so that they have autonomy. Do you want to sit or stand when you complete this activity? Do you want to use a blue pen or a black pen? When it comes to writing, the fewer choices, especially whenever you're just embarking on a genre of writing, the better. So I may give them the choice of strawberry, vanilla, or chocolate ice cream. And I may say, you have to choose one of these three. Which one of these three do you think is the best? That's what we're going to use for our opinion writing. The next thing I would do in writing is to chunk up the material that I'm teaching and what I'm expecting my students to complete. So this opinion, this Oreo chart right here has our introduction of our opinion, reasons behind our opinion, examples, and then restating our opinion, right? Whenever I'm teaching this, I would start out with developing my opinion sentence, which is, in my opinion, strawberry is the best flavor ice cream. And then I would move on to my reason sentence. Strawberry is the best flavor ice cream because, and then I would complete that sentence. I would not pull in examples until I know my students already have completed the first chunked up part. So that introduction and those reason sentences. Once they are able to independently take on this first part of the writing, then I would pull in those example sentences. Setting goals and praising efforts in writing. Working with students so that they can set those goals is important. Also praising those efforts. All right, praising what they are. We're not essentially looking at whether they got a 100 or how correct their work is. We're looking at that motivation. We're looking at that work that those efforts that they are presenting to us. So we're going to support them and help them to set those goals. And as soon as we see them working, we're going to praise those efforts. Of course, just like in math, exemplars. So an exemplar that I would give, and I would start out by showing this and teaching them this, is, in my opinion, Rocky Road is the best ice cream flavor. Rocky Road is the best ice cream flavor because it has marshmallows. Now, if I gave my students a sentence starter, I told them you can choose between strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate, and I had those words written out to support them. They have a graphic, they have a visual support chart here, and I also used an exemplar I would feel very confident that my student would then be able to make a choice between strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate, and they would independently be able to write their own sentence. And of course, using I do, we do, you do, whenever you're providing instruction, is a great strategy to really support students in the writing setting. Now, these are instructional strategies that can be applied in general overall settings. So, so chunking it up. You see my example here. We've got a page here of, I think, 12 problems. I've taken a Post-it note and I have covered, and my student may be expected to complete all 12 problems. But in order to make it less overwhelming for them, I've covered up half of the problems and I've taken a highlighter and I've circled the 3 that I expect them to complete. Once they complete those 3, then I would take a different color highlighter and I would circle the next 3. Once that's done, I would move my paper down. This is a way that we can make it less overwhelming for our students. Sometimes whenever our students see a full task that they have to complete, they just shut down because in their minds, they know how much work it's going to be. They may struggle with self-confidence. But chunking it up, making it less overwhelming, doesn't mean that you are requiring less of them. You are just supporting them and breaking it down into steps for them. You're chunking it up. First, you're to complete this. After that, we're going to complete the next part. All right. And that goes to setting those goals. That speaks to setting those goals also. Check your expectations. Check that your expectations and directions are understood. So in any class that you're in, making sure that those students know what those expectations are, making sure that those students understand the directions that are given. And that is important no matter what you're teaching. Because before a student can show what they know, they have to know what they need to show, right? So making sure that we use instructional strategies that support that concept is great too. Breaking down things into steps. And we've mentioned this earlier too. So knowing what we expect them to complete first, and then next, and finally is important for our kiddos. Setting those goals and praising those efforts works every time in any class, outside on the playground, on the bus. It works everywhere. And focusing on student independence. We want to help our students, but we want to make sure that our help is not enabling them to perform at a less than optimal expectation. Okay, so we want to make sure that we are giving them instruction, we're giving them support, and then we are walking away. We're building that stamina within our students with everything that we do, with instruction, with setting expectations, with recognizing those efforts, with giving them positive behavior supports. We are focusing on student independence. There is a module with the Department of Education. It's entitled Strategies to Support Students in Reading and Math. This is module 3. There's a link here that you can access that module. If you guys want more information, more examples, there are videos here, videos of reading strategy instruction and math problem solving strategies also. So I have linked that here. When I checked a few weeks ago, this link worked. If it does not work, please email me and let me know, and I will make sure that I correct that link for you guys. But I have that here if you guys want some more explanation or want more resources for supporting students with instructional strategies. In closing, best practices, have those examples and have those exemplars. so that the students can see them and so that that can be a support in their learning. Make sure that they are getting those step-by-step instructions, or that we are ordering that learning information. This helps to build understanding in our kiddos. Summarize main points, summarize those directions, whether visually or verbally. Some students may need those exemplars and directions both written out so that they can see what those directions mean as it applies to the task that we're requiring of them. Check in with students frequently and give that feedback. Make sure that feedback hit all 4 of those components. And now find time for co-planning. So I have a list of questions here that you can ask your co-teacher or your co-worker as you are supporting students in their classroom and as you're supporting instruction in their classroom. So one would be, what is your goal, or what do you want the students to accomplish for this task or for this topic? Another one would be, how would you like me to support during the opening time, during the work time, or during the closing? Third would be, do you have any suggestions for learning materials or supports that I can get together for this lesson? Is there anything that I can gather ahead of time that could make us teaching and implementing these learning strategies more effective? Our next, here is session 4 sign-in. This is a clickable link. I will also email you guys this PowerPoint. I will email you a sign-in link to follow and sign in. Make sure that you sign in for today so that I know that you've completed session 4. And this is already dropped in the Google Classroom. The presentation and the sign-in form are dropped in our Google Classroom for those of you who have access to the Google Classroom. Our next session is going to be February 12th. And in that session, we're going to focus on having courageous conversations. So how to effectively communicate with students or with your coworkers at your schools. I thank you guys so much for your time today. I hope that this information has been useful to you. And as always, if you need anything, please email me. Be on the lookout for an email within the next week that has today's recording, today's presentation, and the sign-in sheet on there. Or if you have access to Google Classroom, you can access that from Google Classroom also. All right, I stopped the recording. So, does anybody have any questions? Or for those of you who signed in after 2:05 or who signed on after 2:05, make sure in the chat you drop your first and last name and the district that you work for or the county that you work for. That way I can take attendance for today. Especially if there's a group of you that's maybe signed in on one person's Zoom, make sure that everybody's first and last names and the district that you work for is on there. I want to make sure that we all get credit for attending these sessions. And now, if anybody has any questions, or you can let me know. Got our chat up. Mr. Zuleta, thank you. I'm so glad that you're here today.
Is there a way to double check that we've signed in for the other
Yeah, just
meetings?
tell me your name.
Rachel. Oh, sorry, I'm in a meeting. I'm so sorry. No, you're
Oh,
fine.
Kingsbury. Okay.
Yes. Sorry, my my roommate is in here. She thought I was talking to
You're
her.
fine. And you're in hall, and Mr. Zuleta is in hall too.
Yes.
Yeah, Rachel, I'll check that for you.
Okay.
And I
Thank
will,
you.
if you don't hear from me, then you've signed in for all 4 sessions so far.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all I have for y'all today. You feel free to stay on if you have any questions, or feel free to log off. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for being a part of Para Academy.
Thank you for yours. We appreciate you.
Anytime.
Have a good one.
You too. Thank you, Nicoria. You and Miss Williams both. Thank y'all for being here with us.